I was born in Mississauga, Ontario in 1990 to a family of poor Filipino immigrants. My father left before I was born, and my mother and I lived in poverty with my grandparents, uncle, aunt, and her boyfriend, all in one shared household. My mother never had an education, so she worked cleaning jobs to support us, and when I was 2, we moved to Lakeshore in a 1-bedroom apartment on top of a convenience store. This is around the same time my mother met my stepfather, who also never had an education. When I was around 4, my mother and stepfather got an apartment together in Etobicoke. A couple years later, we relocated to Newfoundland for a year and moved back to Ontario, settling in Cambridge. Here, my stepfather finally landed a well-paying rebar job in Toronto. He drove an hour to work every day, and within a year, he saved enough to buy our first house when I was 10. It was a small 2-bedroom house in Hamilton, a rough neighborhood where I often found myself in trouble, but nothing too serious. Our standard of living was increasing, and we were finally getting out of poverty. But at 16, my mother passed away from breast cancer. My stepfather was devastated. He quit his job and withdrew from life, eventually losing the house. I was also affected, which turned into alcohol, drugs, gang involvement, unconventional ways to make money, and more serious trouble with youth criminal charges, and eventually getting expelled from 3 different high schools, including the entire Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. One night, I was driving under the influence and had a near miss with my best friend. I knew if I stayed on this path, living in Hamilton with no good influences, I would be in jail or dead in no time. So at the age of 18, I decided to turn my life around. I packed my bags and moved back to Mississauga to live with my grandmother, who was still struggling living with 5 other family members. She insisted I finish high school and get a job. I finally graduated high school at 19 and soon landed a job at Canadian Tire, bringing out stock from the warehouse. By 20, I was a supervisor making $35,000 a year, but I knew no matter how hard I worked, my income would not grow much higher. So I decided to pursue college to become a police officer while juggling 2 jobs, Canadian Tire and Fresco. I also was considered an orphan, so I received financial assistance as a monthly allowance. In my first year, I maintained a 4.0 GPA, but early in the second year, my overburdened schedule and social life caught up with me. Working 2 jobs while in school meant if I wanted a social life, it would be late in the night. The problem? My social life always involved drinking, and the alcohol would still be in my system in the morning. And one morning on the way to work, I was arrested for drinking and driving, lost my license, and dropped out of college. My grandmother kicked me out, and I lived in my car for a month until my aunt took me in. Desperate for a new start, I called my stepfather, who was back in Newfoundland. He said he could get me a good paying job, so I packed my bags once again, only to discover he wasn't doing any better than I was, living in public housing in the worst neighborhood in town. And the job he promised me fell through, and I ended up back at a Canadian Tire, which wasn't enough to live on, often relying on food banks and support from the church. Debt piled up, $10,000 on credit cards, $15,000 in student loans, and unpaid mobile and internet bills, destroying my credit. At 22, me and my stepfather got a rebar job with a non-union company. It wasn't steady work, but it paid well. I didn't need any schooling or training, just a company willing to hire me. The following year, I quit that job and joined a union after completing a free 5-week training course, leading to a lucrative camp job building the Hebron oil rig, which my father also worked at too. Soon after, a union company in town offered me journeyman wages to work for them because they couldn't find any workers. So I took the offer and I worked in town. By 24, I was promoted to foreman and earned $50,000, the most I've ever made. We moved out of housing and into one of the newest subdivisions in town. We were on our way to getting out of poverty once again. But despite the income, I was still broke, spending my free time partying and living the same old lifestyle. No matter where I went, I would attract the same group of friends that shared my bad habits. However, that same year, I met my girlfriend, and my lifestyle shifted and my priorities changed. I had to cut a lot of people out of my life to change my habits. Now, I still drank, but it was a healthy balance that didn't negatively affect my life. At 25, I became serious about saving my money and living below my means. I started reading books like Rich Dad Poor Dad and The Richest Man in Babylon. Reading these books really changed my relationship with money. Then I started watching frugal living and saving money videos, started budgeting, creating financial goals, and my girlfriend and I got our first apartment together. By the end of 2015, I paid off $25,000 of debt. I was then earning $75,000. I wasn't earning much more dollars per hour, as raises are only around $1 an hour per year to keep up with inflation. I was just working more hours. See, Newfoundland isn't a big economy, so it's difficult to find consistent 40-hour work weeks doing rebar throughout the whole year, especially during the winter months when there's usually a layoff till the spring. But despite that, I continued to increase my income, making just over $80,000 the following year. And then I opened a TFSA and started investing in the stock market, mainly dividend stocks and a few blue chip growth stocks. I also got a Capital One secured credit card and started rebuilding my credit. I also learned about the first-time homebuyers plan, so I started contributing to my RRSP. By 28, I crossed a six-figure income, largely due to overtime on a downtown condo project. In 2019, work slowed down in Newfoundland. At that time, I was spending all my leisure time playing video games, because it's fun. I got tired of wasting my time and needed another source of income. So I decided to start a personal finance YouTube channel. I would also benefit from the channel by learning more about financial literacy while teaching it. That year, I only made $15,000 from my employer, but I made another $15,000 through YouTube. To supplement my income, I quit my job and took a high-paying rebar job in Argentia, but returned home after a few months when the project shut down due to COVID. Despite the minimal work, I still managed to earn an annual income of $65,000. This is also the year I started investing in crypto and peer-to-peer loans. By 2020, I had grown my assets to $80,000 and I had a credit score in the mid 700s. 2020 was the COVID year, so there wasn't much work going on. I ended the year with an annual income of $46,000, mainly from my YouTube channel, which I grew a lot this year. I also did some rebar work in town and had employment insurance to help me out. I was not eligible for CERB. Knowing that I would have a low income year, I knew I needed to buy a house by the end of the year, or my chances of getting approved for a mortgage would be harder the following year. After connecting with my mortgage broker and being denied a mortgage by two different lenders because they didn't accept my YouTube income, we finally found a lender who did. December 2020, I bought my first single family home for $200,000 with a $40,000 down payment with the help of the first-time homebuyers plan. One of the benefits of living in Newfoundland is that buying a house is a lot more affordable. Now the house is old and small, but it has everything we need, including privacy and a half acre of land. The month we were closing on the house, my partner found out she was pregnant. Since the house wasn't very big, I decided to build a 24 by 24 garage with 2 rooms inside, which eventually would be a studio for my YouTube business and a workshop for my girlfriend's business. In order to pay for the $30,000 garage, which was quite expensive because of COVID, but I saved by doing my own labor, I had to cash out on my Tesla stocks, which grew from $5,000 to $30,000. And it was completely tax-free because I held it in a TFSA. A month after the completion of the garage, my wife and I had our first son. And soon after his birth, my Acura became unrepairable, so I bought a used 2018 Honda Ridgeline. At the age of 31, I had my first car payment. I saved a lot of money not having a car payment throughout the years, but it was time to get something more safe for my family, and the interest rate was great. Also, thanks to savings, I was able to take 3 months off to be with my family. During this 3 months off, I was trend trading SPAC stocks like Lucid and used the profits to buy an engagement ring for my girlfriend. I returned to rebar work building a hotel downtown and earned $86,000 in 2021, while my wife started her baby boutique business selling clothing for babies and mothers. 2021 is still my best year on YouTube, bringing in over $40,000. This is mainly due to the increased popularity of crypto in Canada. In 2022, we adopted a dog from the SPCA. Because of his allergies, he costs as much as a car payment every month. That being said, only when we knew we could comfortably afford a pet is when we got one. I made a similar income to the year prior, finishing off the hotel, but work was drying up and I knew there would be no big jobs in town the following year. So at the beginning of 2023, I quit my job in town and I took a demanding job back in Argentia. 10 to 12 hour work days, an hour and a half commute each way, 14 days on and 7 days off. I hated it. I missed a lot of time with my family, but it was the most I've ever earned, finishing the year with $163,000. This included $20,000 from YouTube, although my channel was fading due to inconsistent uploads. In 2024, I knew I would be getting laid off soon. So that summer, I decided to buy a $12,000 embroidery machine for my partner. It turned out to be a great investment that allows her to earn extra income from home. When I finally got laid off a couple months later, I knew that the rebar work was still slow in town, so I decided to buy a $42,000 stump grinder and start my own stump removal business. September and October was busy, but the calls stopped coming in as the weather got colder. To make ends meet, I added snow clearing for residential properties and occasional rebar jobs in town. I'm now rebuilding my YouTube channel and preparing for spring, when I hope to balance rebar work, stump removals on weekends, and content creation in the evenings. Today, my skills as a rodman earns me $42 an hour with 13% holiday pay, $6 for every hour worked into my pension, and a booklet full of insurance benefits. My stump grinder brings in $150 an hour after expenses, and I do a bit of snow clearing in the winter where I can make $1,000 in one day, and I even have a few side hustles like flipping rims on Facebook Marketplace and selling burn barrels. I also have my YouTube channel, which generates around $2,000 monthly with only 40 hours of work. I've built a sustainable life. My mortgage and property taxes are under $800 a month. My truck payment is $450 a month, but I often drive my fuel-efficient beater. I have no phone bill thanks to my referrals, and I keep my expenses low, only buying what I need. Although my standard of living has greatly increased, I never spend more than I can afford. Me and my partner patiently waited till we could comfortably afford a house, a truck, a baby, a dog, and every other big expense. Currently, I have an RESP for my son, 2 RRSPs, and a union pension for retirement, my crypto, which has more than 5x in value, GICs and an emergency fund, and a plan to buy a rental property in the coming years. Breaking the cycle of poverty was no small feat. My mother and stepfather both tried but couldn't escape it. I tried working hard at Canadian Tire, but it wasn't enough. I tried getting an education and failed. It wasn't luck that got me out of poverty. It wasn't a handout, a lottery ticket, or some magical windfall. It was changing my environment and taking risk. See, the hard truth is that your environment plays a massive role in shaping who you are. I didn't realize at the time that surrounding myself with people who were stuck in the same loop would only make it harder for me to break free. I had to make a difficult decision to step away multiple times. Not just from dead-end jobs, but from the drinking and from the people who didn't align with the person I wanted to become. That eventually led me to getting into the trades and mastering rebar. I took a risk each time I quit for a better job opportunity, not knowing if I burnt a bridge. I took another risk starting my YouTube channel, not knowing if it was going to be a complete waste of time. And I took more risk buying an embroidery machine for my partner and starting a stump removal and snow clearing business. I'm not afraid to fail or take risk because not taking the risk is automatically a failure. And if I did fail, it was just another step forward. Regardless of the shitty hand I was dealt, I'm proof that with the right mindset, discipline, ambition, determination, and relentless effort, anyone can rise above their circumstances. And now, I'm not just living for today, I'm building a future, creating a legacy for my son, and ensuring that the cycle of poverty ends with me. If you want to break free from the poverty trap and live the life you always wanted, check out the video on the right of the screen. See you there.